So let's get into the meat of this. Let's talk about Last of Us Part 3. But before we do, I have something absolutely crazy going on in my brain. What if The Last of Us Part 2 isn't canon? What if they create the Last of Us TV show and create it well of the first game, and they get into the second season and Neil decides to run with a different story? What if the director there decides, oh yeah, this is terrible, let's do this instead? What if they create a better Last of Us 2 in the TV show? That would be my one little hope for the Last of Us franchise. The Last of Us Part 2 wouldn't be canon, it would be some Elseworld story, and we can look at it so much differently in that lens. How dope would that be? Now, a lot of this spurred from this article by Sci-Fi Wire. Trent Moore, Neil Druckmann teases there could be a Last of Us Part 3, but don't hold your breath. Interesting that he says the word could and not that there will be, as everything should indicate that there should be a Part 3 of this game. You can't leave the game in such a mess right now. It just doesn't make sense to use the word could. It should be should. Let's get into this article. In an interview with GQ, Druckmann teased that once he started wrapping up work on Part 2, his mind started to drift to the next thing. It's very clear that his mind fucking wandered to outer space while he thought about an ending to this game, because maybe then, if he didn't wander, it would have been good. He admitted that the next thing could be Part 3. Or the next thing could be some new IP. Here, we've gotten way more of an indication of a Part 3 than we did with Part 2. That is important for, Naughty Dog fandom. Druckmann said a bit more to IndieWire about the odds of a potential Part 3 to return to everyone's favorite post-apocalypse, but opened up about how the law of diminishing returns makes any potential reunion that much harder to pull off. Basically, it took years to figure out a story worth telling in Part 2, so he's not extremely confident they'll find it for Part 3 anytime soon, though it could happen. It's very interesting that he talks about how long it took to find a story worth telling. Interesting, because the story that he deemed worth telling was just a pile of shit. So I feel like anything they come up with in a quicker amount of time ought to be better than The Last of Us Part 2. But the real part here that might be a little confusing is the law of diminishing returns. Let's look that up. The law of diminishing returns means or is used to refer to a point at which the level of profits or benefits gained is less than the amount of money or energy invested. I don't know about you, but if there's something you love, a project or whatever, you don't care if you're gonna make a penny off of it, because it's worth it to you. The idea that he's now equating The Last of Us as something more than his baby, that, he just murdered with The Last of Us Part 2, and it clearly didn't do financially as well as they probably wanted it to, of a diminishing return, as if this was a solely monetary transaction, should tell you where this man is at in his headspace, what he's really thinking about, what really matters to him. Now, it just doesn't have to be money. It could be the energy. Again, when you love something, you're going to put time and effort and energy into it no matter what. I don't believe he has that same love for the franchise as he did with that first game. I do think he might regret actually making this piece of trash. And this just says a lot. Continuing on, I think the test for whether or not to make Part 3, which is just a dumb thing to say, you will make it, would have to be similar test we did to Part 2. Please, whatever the fuck test you did, whoever failed the test, okay? No more tests. Just make a good game. With the first game, there was no expectations and it was like we could do anything. But now that we've established certain characters and themes and processes, it felt like to justify making a Part 2, we had to do something not that fans would be comfortable with, but to do something that would match the emotional core we found in the first game. This is inherently the problem with The Last of Us Part 2. It is shock value versus suspense. They felt like they need to be so emotionally over the top, where the first game was emotionally organic. That's the thing. And with that, there'd be no reason to do a Part 3. Finding it with the sequel was much harder than it was in the first game. And going forward, it'd be exceptionally harder to justify going back to that world and finding a way to vary things up. Why do you have to vary things up? And the idea that he's basically saying there there's no reason to do part 3. There is more of a reason to do part 3 than there ever was for a part 2. This makes no goddamn sense. But I do get what he's trying to say. He's just, A, not backing it up with what has transpired, and B, talking out of his ass. There's already so many things you've seen about the backstory, about the outbreak happens, so you really have to figure out how to create a new experiences that matches the emotional impact of these stories, and I don't know what it is currently. I get the idea that you want to recreate the moment, but instead of recreating a moment that you had in the first game, create a new moment. Don't try to just keep looking to the past. It seems like he's looking to the past as if whatever they had did, he's trying to capture it again. You just have to move on and let the art flow. I say this because the creator of God of War has he was quoted as saying he has the next 5 games ready because he wrote a story, loves that story, and has decided to tell parts of it in games when, you know, it's time for the game. If The Last of Us Part 2 has just been a story they've been writing on the fly, it's no wonder that we ended up with a Part 2 the way it is. It's just Neil Druckmann going off the top of his fucking dome as if he could freestyle. It makes sense, especially considering how Part 2 played out. No, it doesn't make sense at all. Whatever he said, and you're right, you're equating this to this as it makes sense, it doesn't make sense. Not to get into spoilers, but the game made some major shakeups to fans' expectations, as if that's a good thing. With surprise deaths and perspective changes that brought a whole new set of questions and ambitions to the world. That was hard enough to pull off. Finding a way to even further subvert expectations and surprise fans would obviously be even harder. That's subversion. It's like they're jacking off over there, to subverting their thoughts. Oh my god, I can't wait to subvert. Come on, man. Can you just give us a good game? Is it bad to meet our expectations? And mind you, our only fucking expectation was that The Last of Us Part 2 was going to be a good game. That is the only expectation that fucking matters. Any other thing else is up for debate. But it seems like you didn't plan it out with prior thinking if you don't even have an idea of where you would want to take The Last of Us Part 3. But don't worry, Neil Druckmann. I have the idea for you. It makes sense. I know you're gonna hate it, but before we get to my idea, let's get into one idea that is already out there in the world by Alexandria Sarkalarviu, pronounced that wrong, who The Last of Us Part 3 should focus on now. The Last of Us franchise deserves one more entry, and exploring the adventures of this side character would be a perfect way to end the series. Focus on that word perfect, because this is by no means perfect.
Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show.